Good morning, everyone. Our today's lecture primarily will be about postmodernist organization theory, which constitutes of the case study D module of your course. Primarily today, in this lecture, we will be focusing upon understanding the fundamentals and historical roots. We will develop the distinction of the different aspects of postmodernism and how it has related to the areas such as architecture, which we had done with modernism as well. We are also going to understand the differences between postmodernism and modernism theory, and we are also going to understand what essentially is the postmodernist organization theory. And we are also going to focus upon understanding the relationship between postmodernist organization theory and post-industrialism as well as Fordism and Neo-Fordism. So now the main question for us to understand is what is postmodernism? Simply, we can say that postmodernism comes after modernism and it offers some features or certain features that is claimed by some intellectuals as signaling a new age in the development of organization and its members. If we recall what the modernist view was, we highlighted that they believed that organizations is a real entity which reflects an objective reality of our day-to-day lives, and decisions and subsequent actions taken in an organization were based exclusively on reasons, and all its efficiencies and effectiveness was directed towards formally stating the objectives and discovering the universal principles that could govern an organization. If we try and understand what is the main debate because of which postmodernism was introduced, can be summed up as Cooper and Burrell summed up that the debate is polarized around two apparently conflicting epistemological positions: modernism, with its belief in the essential capacity of humanity to perfect itself through the power of rational thought, and postmodernism, with its critical questioning and often outright rejection of the ethnocentric rationalism championed by the modernism. So if we link it to how Russian theorists have presented the era of postmodernism, we could see that they primarily critiqued that the modernist forms of organization, such as bureaucracy, were not the right ways. They believed that too much of the power is centered to the positions, because of which organizations are incapable of responding to the needs of the dynamic environment of the late 20th century. Following the work of different authors, postmodernism has taken many different names in the literature. Seven of the names are listed below, which includes post-bureaucratic organization, postmodern organization, post-entrepreneurial organization, virtual organization, self-designing organization, federal organization, as well as intelligent enterprise. So these names primarily all belong to the same philosophy of postmodernism. Alright, if we talk about the epistemology and ontology of modernism versus postmodernism, we can make reference to the fact that while talking about modernism, we laid the foundation that they primarily, the theorists in that era believed that there is universality that exists that asks for an ordered world, and there is a single reality that we can discover that is the truth. On the other hand, the relativist, they primarily believe that there are multiple realities which depends on your subject position, which means that is about the perspective with which you are looking at things. Then again, we argue that modernists were primarily positivist in nature. They primarily focused on the objective truth, whereas the interpretivist, they primarily focused on the subjectivity of the concern or of the situation in hand. The modernists used more quantitative methodologies that were backed by scientific facts and scientific numbers, whereas the qualitative methods were used by postmodernists who believed that numbers cannot, or the science, statistically backed science, cannot simply narrate everything, and it is primarily about the interpretation and judgment of the people. that defines how things are going to be in a real life scenario. Like we discussed previously with modernism as well, that modernism primarily started because of the architecture, and the phenomena actually started in architecture. So likewise, in postmodernism, the phenomenon also started from the architecture, where the term was first promoted as an architectural term as a reaction against the monolithic modernist structure. So primarily they were against the austerity, formality, and lack of variety of modernist architecture. So what this primarily referring to is the fact that it was being believed that the aesthetic sense of the architecture used or that was followed up by the World War One uh, was primarily more formal, and it lacked variety. It was unanimous primarily, and the same methodology was being followed. So later on in postmodernism architecture, they primarily offered diverse aesthetic features, and it basically created an indifference with respect to unity and purity. And we saw that a lot of new designs were created, and a new methodologies of designing architecture were introduced. So we'll just skim through some of the slides, and we will see that how uh, the postmodernist architecture actually looked like. So, having gone through the architectural changes that were being observed in postmodernist works, you must have noticed that the structuring of the uh, buildings have started changing. They have started forming different designs that represent that provides a more personalized or customized approach to what the organizations within those buildings want to communicate, and it also communicates the ideologies behind the architecture who designed those places. So if we talk about like postmodernist organization theory, yes, definitely we needs to understand that where did this postmodernism organization theory came from, and yeah, it is also important to understand that from where it started. Um, from what we have discussed so far, we can say that we need to understand whether it is simply a breakaway from the modernism, or is it a step forward from modernism, or is it simply an extension of modernism with respect to changing some of the aspects. So literature has actually represented both point of views, and we are going to go through it to understand that how postmodernist organization theory primarily argues that whether it is the extension of modernism or it's a complete different modernism. So when we are talking about organization theory, yes, definitely the organization or understanding organizational structures plays a very important role in that as well. So understanding to understand postmodernist organization theory, we need to understand what's how scholars have explored contemporary organizational forms. Like for example, the basis or the one perspective that is going to be presented with respect to understanding postmodernism is the work on Japanization. The literature examines that how post-industrial society was, and how the post-modernist organization theory started to develop there. So the ideal post-modernist organization would be small in size and functionally decentralized. This is what was concluded in Japanization. So we need to understand that what does this mean? It takes a more kind of clan approach to control. That is like this type of control does not focus on monetary behavior or outcome, uh, of the monetary decisions. Instead, it is more focused towards individuals sharing common values, and activities and outcomes are controlled by their own value systems in absence of an explicit organizational control. Like that is that they are primarily focusing, the control does not lie within the authorities, as we have discussed it in the beginning as well, that postmodernist is primarily breaking away from the bureaucratic structure. So in bureaucracies, the power and positions and the authority lied with the hierarchy, or whatever the rules and procedures were there. So we could say that in bureaucratic structure, the authority lies within the hierarchy. However, in this case, what we are saying is that the control primarily has started going more in the hands of employees, or more in the hand of people who are working for the organization, as they decide, or the value systems which is being developed within the organizations decide that what is going to be the strong, what is going to be the control structure within the organization. So we can say that it will confront more informal and participative manner decision making, and it is also going to result in strong organization, corporate culture that is very important to integrate people within with the organization's mission. So in bureaucratic organizations, the since we said that it has a more singular approach to making sure that all the structures are pertaining to the organizational requirement or the organizational goal. Here, what we are saying is that in postmodernist approach, the decision making became more participated, more informal, and it was backed by strong organizational corporate culture that helped in integrating the organization's mission altogether with respect to each person's individual goals. Okay, now here is the postmodernist ontology, which primarily addresses the postmodernist beliefs that to be very with core of the organization. Like for example, a realist ontology, organizations and their environments exist and are tangible. Change is morphogenic, that is the spontaneous, unpredictable, and discontinuous nature of change process. And finally, postmodern organization is characterized by its flexibility and a belief in the ability to make technological choices. So that is primarily that the core of the organization is that they believe on the realist ontology, that there are different realities that exist, and those realities are tangible, and those realities are not singular. Most importantly, they are morphogenic, that is, they are spontaneous, unpredictable, and discontinuous nature of the change process. And lastly, postmodern organization need to make right technological choices, and they need to be flexible enough to make those choices in order to survive the spontaneousness and unpredictability of the environment. Likewise, if we talk about the postmodernist epistemology, we would the question would be what postmodernists believe to be ways in which we know what are the truths of organizational life. Uh, from your core book, it argued that understanding what is going on depends upon subjective understanding, right? As I said, like as we discussed in the beginning as well, where we were differentiating between modernism and postmodernism, we said that postmodernism were more subjective. They were not depending upon that the world exists in an order. The world is unpredictable, and the understanding needs to be more subjective. Matter in which organizations are conducted in a way that emphasizes uh, indeterminacy. That is the acknowledgement that the environment is highly unpredictable and uncertain. So the organizations need to understand that until and unless there is a close knitting between the people who are working for the organization, they will not be able to respond to the unpredictability and uncertainty that exist in the environment. And lastly, this point is also re-emphasized by the fact that there is an assumption of mutual causality, that is, people look for complexity and interconnectedness of cause and effect relationship. So as we talked about breaking away from the controlled structure and forming a more forming a structure where employees are more empowered. The postmodernist technologies actually back that with respect to the fact that there's a complex structure of boundary relationships that exist. So there is a little distinctiveness of role and emphasis on ability to create relationships to work in the ambiguities, because they said that as there is so much unpredictability and ambiguity or uncertainty in the environment, so if you are just skilled or specialized in one particular skill set, it may get very difficult to for you to adjust in such an environment where there is unpredictability or uncertainty. So you need to be multi-skilled. So it argued that there are high levels of fluidity in relationships. So structure related to function and relationship distributed within the hierarchy. And the relationships between the task and members are holographic. That is, the experience of work is holistic. Like all of everybody learns from it. It's not that only one person will be uh, learning and the other won't be. So since it's very knitted organizations, it's a very knitted culture, so everybody learns from it. And as I previously mentioned, that organizations and work are highly de-differentiated, and members are multi-skilled. So more people need to be able to adjust themselves based upon the changing needs of the organization. And yes, organization is complex with fragmentary and relational forms such as networking and outsourcing. So you can start relating it to the fact that the postmodernist organization theory primarily works parallelly with the post-bureaucratic nature, which we discussed in the previous lecture as well in the organization studies. And you can also relate it to the fact that since the postmodernists actually started breaking away from the bureaucratic structure. And as we also mentioned it, that this is also being referred as post-bureaucratic organizations. So you can relate it to the fact that the more networking-based organizational structures or more outsourcing-based functionalities are the predominant part of the postmodernist organization theory. All right, so moving forward, understanding postmodernist organization theory, let's just try and understand it against the modernist organization theory and compare the two in order to understand that what is the difference between the two and how we categorize the postmodernist organization theory. So this primarily is adopted from Clegg, this the quotation that you are seeing in front of you, and I have divided it into different sentences in order for you to understand it more distinctively. So it says that where modernist organizations were more rigid, postmodernist organizations are more flexible. So flexibility, you can say, with respect to organizational structure is the postmodernist organization theory feature. Likewise, the modernist consumption was premised on mass forms, whereas postmodernist primarily consumptions were premised on niche. All right, so they so that primarily tells you as well that modernists were primarily focusing on uh, the items or on the production of consumption with respect to mass forms, whereas postmodernist focused more on the need. Where modernist organizations was premised on technological determinism, postmodernist organizations is premised on technological choices made possible through dedicated microelectronic equipment. So, like for example, we saw that in modernist paradigms, they were using technology in a more collective manner. There was a more systematic approach to using it. But on the other hand, modernist organizations argued that the electronic equipment started becoming more specialized. It started becoming more concentrated to particular tasks and processes. So they started making technological choices based upon the availability of the technologies as well as how that particular technology is going to help them out. Like for example, the use of information systems, the use of computer systems, for instance, to get processes or to get organizational work done could be an example which we can use here. Likewise, moving forward, we can talk about how modernist organizations are and jobs were highly differentiated, where the focus was on specializing, so that there's a highly specialized labor set, and they perform uh, uh, they were highly differentiated with respect to the fact that the specialization was categorized and divided within the hierarchy in order to understand that okay, what kind of a skill set is required at a particular place. Then again, it was demarcated as well as descaled. Descaling was primarily at the lower end. Specialization was at the higher managerial level, and descaling was at the local or at the operational end. And whereas the postmodernist organizations, they offer jobs that are highly de-differentiated and multi-skilled, where even if you are working at operational level or if you are working at management level, you have to have skills beyond the particular functionality you are adhering to. This is primarily because of the changing organizational structures as well. Like for example, we talked about metric structures on networking structures and virtual organizations and family-based organizations. In all these organizations, you need people who have multi skills, not one primary skill. So these are just the features. These are not the hard lines. These are just the features that is presented based upon the literature, that how they primarily list down the postmodernist organization theory. Lastly, the employment relationships as a fundamental relation of organization upon which has been constructed a whole disclosure of the determinism of size of a contingency variable increasingly give way to more complex fragmentary relational forms such as subcontracting and networking. So once again, as I said, that it is primarily about empowering employees to make decisions that are more focused with respect to the fact that how they create their own value systems, and how in case if there is any contingency or if there is any unpredictability, so they are not going to stay rigid with respect to the fact that we are going to produce it or we are just going to produce whatever we can. Instead, they are going to respond and probably use subcontracting or networking form of organization as well in order to respond to the current circumstances. You can also if you talk about the examples of this, you can say, like for instance, if the demand for, let's say, um, currently the demand for coronavirus kits is are increasing. So it's not that the organizations are going to stay rigid and they are going to say that we are only going to produce whatever we can. They are instead going to share that methodology with other networking organizations, or they are going to subcontract their production to other organizations so that they could cater to the needs of the time, and they could produce enough kits, for instance, that is sufficient for testing the affected people. So before we proceed with the postmodernist organization theory discussion, for today's session, I would like you guys to think about what is the importance of postmodernism theory in today's organizational environment. And all of you are encouraged to actively discuss this postmodernist theory in today's organizational environment in a document that I am going to share shortly with you guys. And each of you should log into that, each of you should open that file, and all of you are encouraged to discuss the importance of postmodernist theory in today's organizational environment with respect to whatever you guys have understood so thus far. And I would like more of interaction with respect to the fact that you will be discussing that how modernist theories are the need of time, and if you believe that the today's organizations are becoming more rigid, today's organizational requirements are changing or it requires flexibility, or it requires more specialized jobs, or does it require more unspecialized and more multi-skilled jobs? So we are going to discuss that how postmodernist organization theory works in this context. In the coming lecture, which will be on Friday, we will be discussing the seven organizational imperatives which were discussed by Clegg in his book, and we are going to develop on the uh, relationships between postmodernism and industrialism, and also we are going to take that forward, and we are going to discuss the exam related question which can be asked, especially with respect to the historical roots of postmodernism theory, and it can also discuss ask you to discuss the comparison between the two theories. So for now, you guys should start responding to the discussion board topic that I have just shared here, and all of you should respond to it. Thank you.